All right, keep going. Mine is preliminary, so grab your coffee and we'll get started here. Phenomenal group last week, and looks like it's going to fill up and be great this week. Thank you so much for participating, and know that we're going to continue to reach out and try to get all groups and all constituencies in the mix. I actually wrote this out because I've had about 40 times where Donovan has said, sit in Howard's group and then you don't have to say anything because he talks too much. So I'm Howard Lamar, and I am a co-chair of what is determined as our discernment committee. And the committee was approved by the session, and we have been meeting since October of 2022 and have met regularly. We are trying to oversee and support the revisioning process. Notwithstanding the articulation of the downfall of Reformed faith and the people in the Presbyterian faith, we came through this process to get to where we are now with a real sense of leading from strength. We think this is an incredibly attractive and vibrant and wonderful environment and great church. And quite frankly, through the last 2 years, I think the guy right here and his cohorts were trying to really understand and figure that out. And it took a little bit of getting into 2023 to really fully appreciate that. And so I think that's so important for all of you to think about is that we have an incredible opportunity, and that and faith combined can be a pretty amazing thing. These 3 weeks, and each week is unique, so please come all 3 weeks if you can at all, are to gather congregational input, the purpose of which to allow our church to envision our path through the balance of the decade. We did this in 2013. We had a 2014, 2015 articulation, and now all of a sudden it's 2023. What happened? Beyond these 3 Sundays, as needed, we'll search out our congregants for future Sundays, Wednesdays, Sunday school classes, whatever it takes to gather and get input. So this is the beginning of a process, and feel free to continue to rein into that, because we want to get everybody's input. The output is only as good as the input. And to that, we're led by Dr. Bill Wilson, who is no stranger to our church. He was wallowing around here when we were doing what we did that now all of a sudden has gotten old, and he understands us and hears us incredibly well. And we are really grateful for Bill, for his insights, his breadth of knowledge. He has been critical already in our process, and he has been incredible to our efforts. What you'll see is we have met to try to narrow the funnel over these last 7 months. We are spending these 3 weeks to garner as much information as we can. And then over the next, call it 90 to 120 days, we're going to continue to massage and work that through and come back to you. And if you remember back to 2013, which I can't even go that far, we put something out that was a short, 4-pager that talked about what is our vision, what are our values, what were our objectives for 2020 back then? So now 2030, what are our long-term goals and what are our near-term strategies to achieve that? So that's this process and this purpose. And that's why your input at every age level is so critical. All right, with that, let's get to something that's actually valuable and helpful instead of me talking. I only said a few extra things. At the end of the day, the goal here is to move the church forward gracefully, thoughtfully, and faithfully to live out what God calls us to do. And that is both internally and externally. And we've got some great resources to help us do that. So thank you very much. And Bill, thank you very much.
Well, I'm glad to be back. Well, this. I'm a bit of a Baptist. My daughter's a Presbyterian, and I went to Union Seminary, and the president when I was there was Hartley Hall. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Some of you more than others, I think. So the center, we work with churches around the country, about 35 of us. I'm working with several PCUSA churches right now and pastor search processes. Now, I'm not here for that. Not that you know of, at least. No, we're leaving him alone. But what we love is an opportunity to help a congregation, what Howard said, move from strength to strength. That certainly is what we found here over the last several weeks and months. So today's opportunity for you is to help us begin to narrow that funnel a bit and to pull us towards some compelling kind of attractional ideas that would pull the congregation into the future based on who you've been. This is not a big course correction, a zigzag. It's building on strength. We use appreciative inquiry. What's right about Westminster? How do we build on it? So thank you in advance. I hope you have a packet of cards. Those are for you to write on, draw on, cartoons, whatever you want. But we're going to be asking you some questions. We also have people online. They're going to be emailing in their responses, and we'll come back next week, give you a tentative summary of what you said, but this is all very important material for us moving forward. All right. A couple of things. Reminder, you had some homework last week. How many of you were here last week? Wonderful. And if you weren't, you can just look like, well, you played hooky and you missed it, and you'll just have to go with it. But Donovan left you with some things to think about, and we hope that's been mulling over for you. He's gotten several emails from you about these things. Thank you. And we hope that this has generated really a season of discernment, not just an event. This is a season, a time that's going to be moving on and on and on. How are we doing, Alec? Alec has been amazing. We've been since before 8 this morning working on this material. There you go. I do want to say just a quick word about who you are and who you're not. And sometimes we think because others, well, we'll talk about others, seem to be flourishing, that somehow we've done something wrong. And I want to affirm Westminster in terms of who you are and who you aspire to be. He and I have been talking a lot about the kinds of churches we see out there. And one is kind of named the consumer church. It's a particular gift to the church, Big C Church, from the American scene in the late 20th and early 21st century. And it mirrors a lot of our culture. What do you want? We'll try to give it to you. Remember the old hamburger joint that, we'll make it your way? Some of you don't know what that is, but some of you do. And congregations fell prey to that thinking. It actually has some flash in the pan positives. The downside of a consumer church is that it tends to be a church that these kind of things are true. Loyalty is based on meeting my needs or what I perceive to be my needs, my preferences usually, and often around music or theology or style. Anxiety in those congregations, when I work with them, is pretty high because we're constantly asking this question: how's the wind blowing? How do we adapt to make people happy? In essence, we're asking, what do you want? We're going to try to give it to you. I call it the concierge pastor. The concierge staff, we're constantly running around asking, can we get you some tickets to the Taylor Swift concert? By the way, 180,000 people last night, Friday night, and tomorrow, or today. There's something there for us to learn from. I'm not sure what it is. I flew in with several Swifties yesterday. One of them telling me she was at 2 shows in Atlanta last weekend and was coming here for 2 more. I'm thinking, you could buy a house for what you're paying for. My little Hampton Inn room was going to cost me $600 last night. So I'm Stayed up near Cookville with my sister. You're welcome. I don't understand. Well, anyway, where was I? Everybody's tired in these churches. They tend to be homogenous crowds. Everybody's in the same political party or the same socioeconomic status. They tend to sort, the big sort material from a few years ago. We tend to align with people who look and think just like us. It's true for all of us, but in these churches, especially so. And the focus is more on the individual. Very American style church. We're hoping is that there's another way of thinking about church, and there certainly is, and we've just called it movement church, to join a movement. The Christian movement that, by the way, predates everyone in this room. It really isn't about you. The movement has been around a couple thousand years. So the loyalty is less to you're meeting my needs and allowing me to join a movement of doing something important, being a part of something bigger than me. And in these churches, we find people are hopeful. They tend to be givers, not takers as much. Now, we all do our share of taking. To be more about what do we need around here, not what do I want. There's a big difference when you ask your children, what do you want for dinner? And the answer is pizza. That's right. My house. Chick-fil-A. What do we need for dinner? Asparagus. Broccoli. Something green, at least. So thinking about needs rather than wants, these churches tend to be a bit more diverse. Their unity is not in everybody agreeing with me, is that we, like spokes on a wheel, we draw toward the same center. But there's room for diversity. And I hope you find that here. I think it's here. These churches, we hope, are a bit more defined by what Greg Jones, the former dean at Duke, who's now the president of Belmont, a Methodist, is the president of Belmont. Just want you to catch that. He calls it traditions innovation, where traditional churches claim their history and heritage, but turn to the world with a sense of innovation and creativity. It's true for companies. Some of you are in companies that are very traditional, that have had to adapt. If you're in a university or a school setting, academic setting, you have a tradition, and yet you're adapting. Certainly churches are like that when they are movement churches. The focus is less on the individual and more on what is God saying to us. Not what's your favorite playlist for church, but what are you discerning? You heard that word earlier. What is God speaking to us? And these churches, it's not just about more and more, bigger and bigger. Sometimes it's doing fewer things better. Interesting thought for you. I said earlier, I want to go back to this one. Consumer churches are like, a friend of mine wrote a book called Growing Perennial Churches. You know the difference between an annual and a perennial? Okay, annuals, as the name implies, are flowers or plants that bloom or live for a season. But what happens when either the temperature gets really hot or really cold? I see that thumb. That's right. They go away. Perennials, which is about 99% of the plant life in America, all trees, grasses, shrubs. What happens to a perennial when winter comes? They take a nap. They go dormant, like some of you do. And sure. They get quiet. They go underground. They look like they're dead. Now, some of those bushes out there are dead. It's been a rough winter in Nashville, but they tend to reemerge on the other side of winter. We call that spring. Isn't it lovely? So congregations can be like that. They can either be hothouse plants that wither under stress, or they can be perennial churches that endure stress and come back, and even endure pruning sometimes, and all sorts of metaphors Jesus gave us. So as we think about your future, we've been trying to think, how do we create congregational life that is more of a movement, joining something bigger than us, than just come and like a restaurant, order off the menu what you want. That makes sense? Well, if it doesn't, ask him. It was part of his. I hope it does, because it's very important. All right, one last thing I want to show, and then we're going to ask you for some responses. Some of you will remember Frederick Buechner, wonderful layperson minister who died not too long ago, but wrote wonderful books. And one of his most powerful sayings in writings was this: the place God is calling you, really intended this for individuals, but I like it for congregations. The place God is calling you is where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. Okay, it's a lovely phrase. We use it with clergy all the time. I use it with my children when they were trying to discern what to major in college. Where's your deep gladness? And where, in your opinion, is the world's deep hunger? And how do those two intersect? So the first thing I want you to think about with me today is try to answer these two questions. On one of your cards, you would, this is a kind of personal thought, and you don't have to share it with anyone if you don't want to. When I talk about deep gladness, I'm thinking, what is it that brings you the most energy, passion, joy, that you feel enlivened by? It may be your job, but it may be your avocation, not your vocation. Or it may be something you just care deeply about, and you'd like the chance to do something with it. I have a sister who is a master gardener and a therapist. You know what she is now? She's a horticultural therapist. That's the thing. Her husband runs a huge psychiatric hospital, and they built a greenhouse, and she's one of the leading people in the nation in blending horticulture and psychotherapy. Her deep gladness, literally, is growing things. And the deep needs she finds, especially in recovery situations, is people who need to believe that they can come back to life. That's what I'm talking about. What's your deep? What is it about you that if money were no object, what would you love to be doing? And what would define you? So just take a couple of minutes, think about that. And if you don't know, that's fine. Maybe just food for thought down the road, but we're going to. And then, as you're thinking about that, also be thinking, what is it about the world today that you see as a deep hunger? Think Nashville, think the United States, think the world, whatever, think your neighborhood, think your grandchildren. What do you see as a deep hunger? Maybe two or three. All right, so on the card, gladness, hunger, make some notes. And then I am going to ask you if you're willing to talk to other people about in a small group, just to talk a little bit about it. All right, I'll give you 2 minutes. This is top of the head stuff. By the way, if you're watching online, feel free to use the email address you see and answer these questions as well. That would be very helpful to us. If you want to give a subject line, put revision or the most important email you'll receive today or something like that. What I'd like you to do is form a triad. That's 3 people with 2 other people, and just do a quick share of, if you're willing, what'd you say, and tell them a little bit about it. This is the short version. You know, we're bullet points, not paragraphs. But form a triad with 2 other people. Hopefully, at least one of them is not a member of your family. That'd be nice. So just take a moment, go, and I'll call you back.
Give me 30 seconds.
Absolutely. But they're so good. Take about one more minute. One more minute. Okay. All right, if I could have your attention. I really hate to break up that conversation. So it's just a reminder, we really do want on one of your cards, if you could capture what you said there, that would be helpful. You don't put your name on it, just what's your deep gladness? What do you sense as a deep hunger? By the way, I meant to mention earlier that one of my credentials here is that Guy Griffith and I pastored together. He was at First Pres and I was at First Baptist, and he was the only other minister in town I actually enjoyed being with. So we had a good time for a while in Dalton, Georgia. Epistle guy was pretty good. Yeah, he ended up being a bishop. So anyway, so I'm curious. Here's how I want to ask, and this will not get everybody's response, but what did you hear someone say that caught your ear? So I don't want to hear what you said, but what is something someone in your triad or group of four said, and a word or two in terms of their deep gladness? What did you hear that was interesting? Yes, interesting. Just whatever. Family. Okay. Any other families in the community? Deep gladness. Service. Seems like Jesus said something about you give to give your life, find your life. What's another deep gladness you've heard? Watching people grow and change. The arts. Flowers. Annuals or perennials. Yes. Community helping others. Teaching. My wife would do that, elementary teacher, in her bloodstream. Listening. How about the world's deep hunger, Nashville's hunger? What kind of things did you hear there? Fear. Fear. Attention. Loneliness. Hunger and homelessness. Belonging. Mental health care. Absolutely. Division. Security. self-worth. You heard some of that last week with the material from the Nashville study. It's interesting how long that list can be. And sometimes we forget how important that first list is. But that the church has always been at its best when we claim our giftedness or our calling or our sense of urgency and intersect that with the needs around us. Now, some churches, what we do is we retreat. Because a lot of what you just said, those hungers are threatening. We tend to build walls and pull back and become isolated from and apart from and looking down on all of them. Just a reminder, how did Jesus feel about Jerusalem? Remember when he came and looked over the city? He wept. Now, there's a text where he talks about Jerusalem and he cares for them because they're harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. So he wasn't weeping saying, what a disaster. He was weeping for the people, right? Because his heart was broken for the city. I'm constantly saying to congregations, city is where God, if you look at scripture, actually, that's where the action is. And here you are in one of the great cities of the world, in a timely moment, surrounded by opportunity, with an incredible array of gifts and hungers and longing on your part. All right. Got one more slide. This is it. And it's just a series of questions for you. We really do want to hear from you. So if you're online, again, this is your response spot. If you were here last week, I'm going to put up all 4 questions. You can look at them and we'll divvy up your time accordingly. Did you hear anything that you haven't been able to stop thinking about? And if you weren't here, then you didn't, but you can listen to other people. Or any of that caused you to follow up, do some reading, check it out kind of thing. Second question, in terms of, I'm not asking you this is not the shopping list question. What is it that you, as you think through discerning the future of this great church, what do you need Westminster to be in your life? Now, I'm asking the 30,000-foot question. What role and what place does it need to play for you? Now, I've had people literally say to me, look, you all do what you want. I just want to make sure you're there to do my funeral. And she wasn't kidding. Okay, that's pretty clear. But I've also had people come up and say, I want to be a part of a church that's trying to do something significant. Especially younger adults are asking, you see all these needs, what are we going to do about that? A lot of them don't think the church is going to do anything. They think we're here hiding out behind the magnolia trees. No, they want to know, what is it you're going to do in the name of Christ to heal the city? So I'm curious, we're curious, what is it you think this place needs to be for you? I know that's a bit of an esoteric question, but wrestle with it. Third question, what do you think God needs Westminster to be? May or may not be the same thing. When you look at the religious landscape of Middle Tennessee, for example, what do you think God needs this church to be about? Not just what do you want, but what does God need from you? And finally, I hope it shows up. Eric, Alec, my bad. Remember that 4th question? All right, I have to, hang on just a minute. I'll be right back. Work on those three questions. I'll be back in a moment. That's right. Here we go. There we go. And this is a teaser for next week. We've been thinking about some hopes and dreams you have that might be a little more specific. We're going to invite you into the behind the curtain to begin thinking, what would it look like to be the kind of church you need and God needs? What would that look like fleshed out? So this is just a beginning. Now, what I'd like you to do is, if you could, you have multiple cards there. With question number 1, number 2, number 3, because we're going to sort these afterwards. It would be really helpful if we knew which question you were answering when you wrote something. And could you try to write legibly? Is that even, do any of you actually handwrite anymore? Do we? Sorry, we have to make you write, but just, even if it's just a few words or phrases, that's good enough. What I'd like to do is give you 5-7 minutes to jot down some initial thoughts, and then we're going to have conversation around this, okay? And I'll sort of call time as we move through the questions. So take a crack at all 4 of them, if you would, if appropriate. And if you want to land harder on one than the other, that's fine. And then I'll give you a signal in a moment. We'll jump back in our triads and talk about things. You have questions? Can I help? Wondering what how COVID plays. You gotta stand up where they can hear you. Yes. Yeah. You ever been in front of a group?
I've never been in front of a group. Is this on? Yeah. I'm wondering how COVID plays in this for all of you. Whether we're in a period of healing, I don't know. And whether once we heal, we move out, whether that has no effect, whether you're ready to go or not. I'm just wondering whether we're in a funny situation right now for all of us. That's just a thought.
Right.
Okay.
The answer is yes. All churches are in recovery mode from one of the most profound changes we've ever experienced. But I'd hope you could think a little higher than just recovering from COVID. It has fundamentally changed the American church in many respects. The fact that we've got 30 or 40 people joining us today virtually wouldn't have happened 4 years ago. But beyond that, try to rise a little higher. But if it has something to do with COVID, absolutely feel free to address that. All right, give you a few minutes to talk, and then I'll give you a signal to write, and then I'll give you a signal for talk. Homework slide. Everybody got the questions? Can you remember those? More or less. I'll come back to it in a moment. He's got it. He's got it. Never mind. I'm going to leave these up. Thank you. when you're willing, let's go ahead and begin a conversation. Feel free to keep writing even as you're talking, but I'm just cognizant of the time. We've got 15 minutes and I want to give you some time to talk with one another before we have to break. So re-engage with your folks and let's talk about any of the questions that you would like to share with each other. Your call. If I could get your attention, please. Here we go. All right, we're going to go ahead and begin. Feel like I'm back in middle school here. So, all right. Thank you all for your energy. I know it's hard to stop that conversation. I was a youth minister for 10 years. I feel like I'm back the middle schoolers. This is great. So I want to underscore a couple of things you've already heard. Number one, this is the tip of a discernment iceberg. This is really just beginning to really prime the pump to help you sort of unlock parts of your thinking that may have not been visited in a while. What we know about most adults is we get less imaginative as we grow older. You know, when you were 10, you had your artwork on the refrigerator, and you probably haven't done that lately with your stuff. But you still have this God-given ability to dream and envision, and you just don't use that muscle very often. So we want to use the sanctified imagination idea, Walter Brueggemann, that there's a part of you that can think beyond just the pragmatic of today. What are we having for lunch? What am I doing tonight? You know, what's tomorrow? To think bigger. And that's the idea of this whole process. And it's really an exercise in what we call adaptive leadership or adaptive learning. That we know things and we adapt to the situation as it evolves, right? You know that. Some of you, anybody got a smartphone? Did you have that 30 years ago? No, you had one of those with a cord. Remember that thing? Yeah, we're still communicating, but we've adapted our methods a bit, or we haven't. I think you had a certificate last week from Bed Bath & Beyond. Some people adapt better than others. I've got a slide with the Blockbuster Video Store. Yeah. So adaptability personally and corporately is at the heart of good thinking and discernment. The church is always, every Sunday is Reformation Sunday. Every Sunday we're thinking, how do we continually adapt our lives to the gospel and make the gospel relevant for this day, not just that day. So it takes work, honestly. And the more you are involved in this, the less it becomes, well, I didn't like the way they did that. You know, that kind of spirit. And it becomes more of we. Look at what we're doing. Look at how we are doing church, not, you know, I'm critiquing like I do at the theater or at the restaurant. So really, really important for you to engage in this kind of visioning, thinking process. That last question is the one we want you to really focus on over the next 7 days. We'll be back in this room next Sunday, same time, same place, same channel. Some of you remember that too. But ask God to give you dreams and visions. And when the Spirit moves, the old men will dreams, and young men and women will see visions. So what would it look like in this adaptive culture where we're constantly reinterpreting ourselves for the world we live in? The rest of the 2020 decade, with only 6.5 years, by the way, hard to believe. But what do you think God needs and the world craves that Westminster is called to be about? So give that thought, right? And let it be your last thought at night, first thought in the morning, and see what happens. Howard? And by the way, every piece of paper you wrote on, we'd like to have. And we'll come back next Sunday and give you a quick flyby of what you said. Maybe not every single word, but some summary of that. So you can either leave them on the tables at the exits or just hand them to Howard.
Perfect.
He deserves it.
Which means put them in the buckets 1, 2, 3, and 4, because
There
I'll
you go.
have
Okay.
3 and 2 and 7 and 4 that didn't even
There you
exist.
go.
So quickly wanted to close this here with a couple of things, which is this is incredibly timely for us. And I can't thank y'all enough for participating and really encourage you to ask others to participate. I mean, we're on the cusp of 150 years at this place, which is extraordinary, the legacy that goes back. And so, it's all about what comes next, whether that's 50 years or 100 or, God bless us, another 150. So please tell people to participate. Secondly, I want to reiterate, because we spent a lot of time talking about it. We truly believe, the people who've been trying to, build a process here, think this place is leading from a position of strength. And we want to hear from you if you feel differently. Don't take that at face value. It's an amazing thing that has happened here. And one of those positions of strength has been, we think of this as a big tent place. And I think it's important to put that out there in the forefront of this. And what I mean by that is it's a place where people can have differing opinions and do that in an appropriate discourse. And everything doesn't have to be dropped into a vertical of political or whatever, because it's tearing our world apart and we need to be thoughtful about that. Lastly, and most importantly, the staff and the lay people that have been doing all this have been incredible. And it's administrative staff and the theological staff, and their insights and their observations have been incredible. So we are not running crazy. And most importantly for that, particularly with me at the mic, is you should know that Terry Rapune she's really the chair of this committee, but we call it co-chairs. And she has done an incredible job, and we are so blessed to have all of this group and these people to help. But please encourage others. Please, we're going to do things that draw this further than just next week. As Bill said, this is the tip of the iceberg. If you have issues and thoughts, bring them to us. Tom?
Yeah,
Yes,
it was up.
it was up there. And this will be, you'll see it continuing, but thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's helped put it together. And Bill, thank you for all that you're doing for us. It's hugely helpful. Amen.
Go in peace. Thank you.